In the heat of a southern sun rises a team forged not in glory, but in growing pain. They were not born of greatness. They have not tasted the confetti, but in their struggle, there is a hunger. The Jacksonville Jaguars, young in name, scarred in spirit, and now standing once more at a crossroads. The road to the AFC crown is wide open. The Texans, newly crowned in glory. The Colts, searching still for their identity. And Tennessee, rising again from the shadows. But for Jacksonville, the path is not wide. It is narrow, winding like the jungle from which they draw their name. The odds, long. The challenge, relentless. But in that challenge comes the chance to become something greater. Yet, in the city where fans bleed teal and gold, a familiar fire burns. They remember the early days, the roar, the grit, the near glory. And now, they long not just to rise again, but to reach the pinnacle they were once promised. 2025 will either mark a turning point where the promise is kept, or where it fades into the shadows of what could have been. The hopes of this franchise ride on the shoulders of the golden-haired Trevor Lawrence, and a defense whose fire burns as hot as the Jacksonville sun itself. This is their time. The moment is now. For Trevor Lawrence, for the city of Jacksonville, for the Jaguars, the road to glory starts here. After narrowly missing the playoffs in 2023, Trent Baalke attempted to retool the offense and defense by signing Eric Armstead from the 49ers and drafting Brian Thomas Jr., the speedy wide receiver out of LSU. Hope-filled Jaguars fans dug Pederson and players in the locker room, but that hope faded and turned into a nightmare. The offense once filled with promise, now lost in the storm. The rhythm once smooth, now broken, like the pieces of a shattered dream. The ground game struggling to rise, its power stifled by unseen forces. The air once filled with hope, now still waiting for a spark. A team caught in the tempest of its own making. The offense of the Jacksonville Jaguars in 2024 could be described as anemic, inconsistent, and often injured. Whether it was the offensive line, Christian Kirk, Trevor Lawrence, ETN, and Evan Ingram, they just couldn't find their footing. The lone bright spot was Brian Thomas Jr., who finished with 10 touchdowns, over 1,000 yards, and 80-plus catches. Trevor Lawrence, 2,045 yards, 11 touchdowns to 7 interceptions, and Mac Jones didn't help either. ETN, their star running back, finished with 580-plus yards and 2 touchdowns. And almost every statistical category outside of red zone offense was ranked in the bottom half. Red zone offense was 13th in the league, but points per game, 18.8, which was bottom half. Also bottom half, rush yards per game with 101. Pass yards per game with 204, 205. Let me double check. 204.5, which was 24th in the league. Couple that with turnovers, and you have a recipe for disaster. Once a force of nature, the defense faltered, its roar fading into whispers The pass rush, once a terror, now a mere echo. The secondary exposed, a path for every opponent, cutting through the defense with ease. Where walls once stood, only cracks remained, wide enough to be exploited. A defense that had once stood tall, now crumbled under pressure, searching for the strength it had lost. After the defense faltered at the end of 2023, the Jacksonville Jaguars went out and hired defensive coordinator Ryan Nielsen, who helped turn the Atlanta Falcons into a respectable defense. They were hoping that he can do the same for their team, but the results were disastrous. They ranked near the bottom of almost every statistical category, including points per game at 25.6, 27th in the league. Rush yards per game, not very good. 132.6, which was in the bottom half of the 20s. Also, dead last in pass yards per game with 257.4. Let me double check. Yep, 257.4. I'm looking at my notes over here. Couple that with a bad defensive line where Trayvon Walker had 10.5 sacks, and that was the only bright spot of the defense. The rest of the defensive line combined for 34 sacks, including Eric Armstead, who didn't perform up to snuff with only 2 sacks. 113 tackles from Devin Lloyd, and only 9 turnovers for them. 6 interceptions, and 3 fumble recoveries. When your offense isn't performing and your defense isn't performing, you're going to lose a lot of football games. And the Jaguars lost a lot of football games. They ended up firing Doug Pederson, and then fans called for the firing of Trent Baalke. They would go into the off-season with more questions than answers. How did they get from a team that was on the cusp of the playoffs to a team that was on the cusp of getting the number 1 overall pick for the 3rd time in 5 years? The season had ended, not with a roar, but with a whimper. Like a wounded cat, the Jaguars retreated, licking their wounds, tending to scars both seen and unseen. But in the heart of the jungle, even the quietest rivers run deep. And in Jacksonville, hope begins to stir again. Quietly, steadily, flowing back through a franchise desperate to rise. This was not surrender. It was renewal. The slow, silent strength of a team rebuilding its pride. The Jacksonville Jaguars went into the 2025 offseason broken and beaten, whatever analogy you want to use. A lot of questions going into next season. Are they as good as they were in 23, where they were on the cusp of the playoffs? Or is it going to be more of the same? They lost Evan Ingram to the Broncos, although he's 31. And they traded away Christian Kirk, their longtime receiver, for a 7th-round pick in 2026. Signed Ryan Hainsey to play center going into this season. They also drafted Travis Hunter from Colorado, who was the Heisman Trophy winner. And I think he can be good depending if he plays 2 positions or 1 position. But some people are not quite convinced of his star status.
And now we move on to the Jacksonville Jaguars. And let me tell you, that's my personal opinion, maybe because I'm a Titans fan and I really don't like the Jacksonville Jaguars or their owner, Tony Khan. Whole different video, whole different genre. They had a bad draft, and I'll tell you why. I don't think Travis Hunter's game is going to translate well to the NFL. I know it's a hot take. I know you guys are going to hate me. But let me explain why. At the last 10 years, on Pro Football Focus, he had the worst graded Heisman winner of the last 10 years. He plays 2 sides of the ball. He's going to want to go defense and offense, which is fine. But in the NFL, it does not happen. You can't do that. You're going against grown men, people who are the best in their position in college, now in the NFL. You really think Travis Hunter is going to be able to lock up Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase, all those guys, and go back on offense and go against, all the all-pro corners? You got to go Pat Surtain, Jair Alexander, all these other guys. You really think he's going to be able to do that? No, he will not. So I have the Jacksonville Jaguars personally going at the bottom of the AFC South next year. That's my hot take. Let me know what you think.
They also drafted Caleb Ransaw from Tulane, 5'11", 197-pound corner, and Wyatt Millum, the guard from West Virginia, to shore up that offensive line. Their coach got fired, and they hired Liam Cohen, who was the offensive coordinator for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. The question is being a first-time head coach, can he lead the squad? Is he a coach, or is he an offensive coordinator like Josh McDaniels, who, in my opinion, isn't a good head coach? I said it in my last video with the Patriots. But are they going to be good in 2025? I think they have the potential to do well. I think if they don't get injured, Etienne plays like he did, the defense plays way better than they did at the end of 23 and 24, I think they could be a playoff team. Now, I said the Tennessee Titans are going to be second in the division, but when I look at the Jaguars team and actually study what I'm supposed to be studying, the Jaguars have the potential to win the division or get second and sneak into the wild card round. I think the Texans took a step back, but we'll get into that in another video. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. This has been Hill Time Sports.